Jake Turner was not having a good day. He stood in the middle of a room that cost more than everything he had ever owned in his entire life. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed soft purple. The floor was so clean he could see his own reflection staring back at him with a confused expression. And somewhere behind him, an alien artifact was making a sound that reminded him of a very excited cat. All he had wanted to do was fix the air conditioning. The Horizon's Edge was humanity's first major diplomatic vessel. It had been floating next to the Valorian space station Eternal Crown for 3 weeks now. Jake was one of the engineers on board. His job was simple. When things broke, he fixed them. When things did not break, he made sure they stayed that way. This morning, his supervisor had called him with a special assignment. The environmental systems in the Valorian delegation's quarters were acting up. The temperature kept changing on its own. Someone needed to go in and repair it. Do not touch anything, his supervisor had said. Do not look at anything too long. Do not speak unless spoken to. And whatever you do not mess with their religious stuff. Jake had nodded and promised to be careful. That promise had lasted about 20 minutes. The problem with the environmental system turned out to be a loose connection behind one of the wall panels. Easy fix. Jake had his tools out and was almost done when he noticed the crystal sitting on a pedestal in the corner of the room. It was beautiful. It looked like someone had captured a piece of a sunset and frozen it in glass. Colors swirled inside it, moving slowly like they were alive. Jake found himself walking toward it without really meaning to. He did not touch it. He was very careful about that. But he did lean in close to get a better look. And when he leaned in, his elbow knocked against the pedestal. The crystal wobbled. Jake grabbed it to stop it from falling. The moment his fingers touched its surface, the whole room exploded with light. Jake stumbled backward as the crystal rose into the air on its own. It spun faster and faster, throwing beams of gold and silver in every direction. A deep humming sound filled the room, growing louder and louder until Jake had to cover his ears. Then a voice spoke. It came from everywhere at once, old and powerful and very, very loud. The Soulbender has chosen. The bond is declared. Let all who witness know that the mate of Princess Larenthi Velsora has been found. Jake's face appeared in the air above the crystal. Not just in this room, but on every screen on the entire space station. Thousands of Valorians looked up and saw a confused human engineer holding a wrench in one hand and a piece of wire in the other. What? Jake said. The crystal floated down and began circling around him like a happy puppy. It bumped gently against his shoulder as if it was proud of itself. No, Jake said. Stop that. Go back to your pedestal. I did not sign up for this. The crystal ignored him and kept circling. That was when the door burst open. Jake had seen pictures of Valorians before. They were tall and blue and had 4 arms. They were supposed to be one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. But seeing one in person was different. Seeing one who was clearly very angry was even more different. Princess Larenthi Velsora stood in the doorway. She was 7 feet tall with skin the color of a summer sky. Her 4 arms were crossed over her chest. Her eyes, which looked like pools of liquid gold, were fixed on Jake with an expression that made him want to run and hide. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She looked like she wanted to throw him out an airlock. What have you done? She asked. Her voice was cold enough to freeze water. I was fixing your air conditioning, Jake said. It seemed important to establish that he was not entirely at fault here. Larenthi looked at the crystal still floating happily around Jake's head. She looked at the image of his face that was only now starting to fade from the walls. She looked back at Jake himself, standing there in his work uniform with grease on his hands. Me? She said. Her voice cracked slightly. As your mate? Jake opened his mouth to explain that there had clearly been some kind of mistake. "You cannot be serious," Laurenti continued. She turned to the crystal. "You cannot be serious." The crystal made a cheerful chiming sound. Behind Laurenti, more Valorians were gathering. Jake could see their shocked faces peering into the room. He heard whispers spreading through the crowd. Words like human and impossible, and this must be an error, reached his ears. "Look," Jake said, raising his hands in what he hoped was a calming gesture. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. I just came here to do repairs. I did not mean to activate your glowing ball thing. The Salbender crystal," Laurenti said through gritted teeth, "has been used by my family for 10,000 years. It identifies the perfect match for each royal heir. It has never made a mistake." "Wow," Jake said. "There's a first time for everything." Laurenti stared at him. For a moment, Jake thought she might actually attack him. Then she took a deep breath and seemed to regain control of herself. "This is impossible," she said, more quietly now. "I have trained my entire life for the selection ceremony. I was meant to be bonded to someone powerful, someone important, someone who could stand beside me and help me lead." Jake looked down at his grease-stained hands. He looked at the wrench he was still holding. He looked back up at the princess who was apparently now supposed to be his wife or something. "Lady," he said, "I hate to tell you this, but I am just an engineer. I fix things. That is what I do. I am nobody special." The crystal bumped against his cheek affectionately. Laurenti closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with a determination that Jake recognized. It was the look of someone who had just decided to fight against fate itself. "We will see about that," she said. "The council will convene. This bond will be examined. And when they see that you are not worthy, it will be dissolved." She turned and walked away, the crowd parting before her like water. Jake stood alone in the room with the crystal still floating around him. He thought about his nice, quiet life as an engineer. He thought about how all he had wanted was to fix an air conditioning unit. "This is not good," he said to the crystal. The crystal chimed happily in response. Jake sighed and sat down on the floor. Somewhere out there, his face was probably still being broadcast across the galaxy. His supervisor was going to kill him, and he still had not finished fixing the air conditioning. The news spread faster than Jake could have imagined. Within hours, everyone on the horizon's edge knew what had happened. Within a day, the story had reached Earth. Within a week, Jake Turner had become the most famous human in the galaxy, and he hated every second of it. His quarters on the ship had become a prison. Every time he tried to leave, someone wanted to talk to him. Reporters from human news networks sent him hundreds of messages. Valorian officials kept requesting meetings. His own crewmates looked at him like he had grown a second head. The only person who treated him normally was Megan Price. Megan had been Jake's best friend since engineering school. She was short and loud and had a habit of saying exactly what she thought without caring who heard her. Right now, she was sitting on Jake's bed, eating snacks from a bag while he paced back and forth across the small room. "So let me get this straight," she said through a mouthful of chips. "You went to fix an air conditioner. You accidentally touched a magic crystal. And now you are engaged to an alien princess." "I am not engaged," Jake said. "The bond thing is different. I think. Nobody has really explained it to me. But you are basically space married. Megan, please stop helping." She grinned and threw a chip at him. "This is the funniest thing that has ever happened to anyone I know. I am going to enjoy this forever." Jake caught the chip and ate it. He had not had a proper meal in days. Every time he tried to eat in the cafeteria, people stared at him and whispered. "The Valorian Council meets tomorrow," he said. "They are going to decide what to do with me." "What do you think they will decide?" Jake stopped pacing and leaned against the wall. I do not know. The princess made it pretty clear she does not want this. Maybe they will find some way to cancel the whole thing. And if they cannot, then I guess I become the first human to cause an interstellar incident by doing electrical work. Megan laughed, but then her expression became more serious. Jake, have you thought about what this could mean? Not just for you, but for everyone? Humanity just made first contact a few years ago. We are still trying to prove ourselves to the rest of the galaxy. If this goes wrong, I know, Jake said quietly. Trust me, I know. The next morning, Jake was escorted to the Valorian throne room. He had never seen anything like it. The ceiling was so high, he could not see the top. Pillars of crystal rose from the floor like frozen waterfalls. Thousands of Valorians filled the room, all of them watching him as he walked toward the center dot. At the far end of the room sat Emperor Velsora IX. The emperor was old, older than any Valorian Jake had seen. His blue skin had faded to a pale silver. His forearms rested on the arms of his throne. But his eyes were sharp and clear, and they studied Jake with an intensity that made him want to look away. Princess Larenthi stood beside her father. She did not look at Jake. Human, the emperor said. His voice filled the entire room without seeming to get louder. Come forward. Jake walked until he stood at the base of the throne. He was not sure if he should bow or kneel or what, so he just stood there and tried not to look as scared as he felt. You have caused quite a situation, the emperor continued. The Salbinder crystal has declared you the bondmate of my daughter. Many in my council say this should be ignored. They say humans are too young, too primitive, too unworthy of royal blood. Jake heard angry murmurs from the crowd around him. But, the emperor said, and the room fell silent. The crystal has never been wrong. In 10,000 years, it has always chosen well. I will not be the emperor who breaks with that tradition, simply because the choice is unexpected. Larenthi turned to her father with a look of shock. Father, you cannot mean, I have made my decision, the emperor said firmly. The human will be given a chance to prove himself. He will complete the 3 trials of worthiness. If he succeeds, the bond will be honored. If he fails, it will be dissolved with no dishonor to either side. The crowd erupted in noise. Some were angry, some were surprised, and a few seemed almost impressed. Jake just stood there trying to process what he had heard. Trials. He had to complete trials. What kind of trials? He asked. His voice sounded very small in the huge room. The emperor almost smiled. The trial of mind, the trial of body, and the trial of heart. They will test whether you are truly worthy of standing beside my daughter. Many Valorians have attempted these trials over the centuries. Not all have survived. Jake felt his stomach drop. You will have 1 month to prepare, the emperor continued. My daughter will serve as your guide. She will ensure you understand what is expected of you. Now Larenthi looked truly horrified. Father, I must protest. It is decided, the emperor said. You will work with the human. You will teach him our ways. And perhaps, in the process, you will learn something about why the crystal chose him. The audience ended shortly after that. Jake was led out of the throne room by guards, who looked at him like he was some kind of strange animal. As he walked, someone fell into step beside him. Larenthi. She did not speak until they were alone in a corridor. Then she stopped and turned to face him. Let me make something clear, she said. Her voice was like ice. I do not want this bond. I do not want you. But I will do my duty because my father commands it. You will do exactly as I say during these trials. And when you fail, because you will fail, we will both be free. Jake looked up at her. She was so much taller than him, so much more powerful. By every measure, she was right. He should not be here. He should not be doing this. But something in him refused to accept that. What if I do not fail? He asked. Lyranthi blinked. What? You said I will fail. But what if I do not? What if I actually pass these trials? She stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Human, the trial of mind has puzzled our greatest scholars. The trial of body has killed warriors far stronger than you. The trial of heart has broken nobles who seemed unbreakable. You are an engineer who fixes machines. You have no chance. Jake thought about her words. He thought about everything he had heard today. He thought about Megan's question about what this could mean for humanity. Then he straightened his shoulders and looked the princess directly in her golden eyes. Maybe, he said, but I'm going to try anyway. That is what humans do. For just a moment, something flickered in Lyranthi's expression. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. Then it was gone, and her face was cold again. We begin training tomorrow, she said. Do not be late. She walked away without looking back. Jake stood alone in the corridor and took a deep breath. He had no idea how he was going to survive these trials. He had no special powers or ancient knowledge or noble blood, but he had something else. He had stubbornness. He had creativity. And he had absolutely nothing to lose. The trials would begin soon. And Jake Turner, engineer from Earth, was going to give them everything he had. The grand bonding hall was filled with more beings than Jake had ever seen in one place. Dignitaries from across the galaxy had come to witness the ceremony. Valorians, humans, and dozens of species Jake could not even name filled the massive chamber. Light streamed through crystal windows, painting everything in shades of gold and silver. Jake stood at the center of the hall, trying very hard not to pass out. His injuries had healed over the past few weeks, thanks to Valorian medical technology. But standing in front of thousands of people, wearing ceremonial robes that weighed more than he did, was a different kind of challenge entirely. Stop fidgeting, Megan whispered from beside him. She had been allowed to stand as his witness, a position usually reserved for family. You look like you are about to run away. I am considering it, Jake whispered back. Do not even think about it. I did not come all this way to watch you chicken out. Jake smiled despite his nerves. Having Megan here made everything feel more real. More like home. Music began to play, deep and ancient and beautiful. The crowd fell silent. Everyone turned toward the entrance of the hall. Lyranthi appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a gown made of flowing silver fabric that caught the light with every movement. Her blue skin seemed to glow. Her golden eyes were fixed on Jake, and she was smiling. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She walked down the aisle slowly, all four arms at her sides, her head held high. She moved like a queen, like a goddess, like someone who knew exactly who she was and was not afraid to show it. But when she reached Jake, her smile softened into something more personal, more real. Hello, she said quietly. Hi, Jake replied. His voice cracked slightly. You look amazing. You look terrified. I am. Is it obvious? Only to everyone in the room. They both laughed, and some of the tension broke. Emperor Velsora rose from his throne and walked to stand before them. He looked older than the last time Jake had seen him, but there was warmth in his eyes. We gathered today to witness a bonding unlike any in our history, the Emperor said. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. A human and a Valorian, united by the will of the Salbinder crystal. Some called this impossible. Some called it wrong. But the crystal has never been mistaken, and neither am I. He turned to Jake. Jake Turner of Earth, you came to us as a stranger. You proved yourself through trials that have defeated warriors and scholars and nobles. You showed us that courage is not about being fearless, It is about being afraid and doing what must be done anyway. Do you accept this bond freely and without reservation? Jake looked at Lyranthi. He thought about everything that had happened since that day, when he had just wanted to fix an air conditioner. He thought about the trials, the fear, the pain. He thought about the moment she had stood between him and the soldiers, declaring him her bondmate to the entire empire. I still do not fully understand what is happening, he admitted. I am not royalty. I am not a warrior or a scholar. I am just an engineer who got lucky. But I know that Lyranthi is the most incredible person I have ever met. And if she's willing to take a chance on me, then yes, I'm in. A murmur ran through the crowd. Jake's answer was not traditional, but it was honest. And honesty, they were learning, was the human way. The Emperor turned to Lyranthi. Lyranthi Velsora, daughter of the Empire, you were destined for greatness from birth. You have been trained to lead, to rule, to sacrifice yourself for your people. Do you accept this bond freely and without reservation? Lyranthi took Jake's hand in one of hers. Her skin was cool against his, but her grip was strong. My whole life I was taught that strength meant being cold, that duty meant being alone. I believed that love was a weakness that I could not afford. She paused. Jake showed me that I was wrong. He showed me that the strongest thing a person can do is open their heart to another. I do not just accept this bond. I choose it. I choose him. And I would choose him again, 1,000 times over. The Emperor smiled. Then let it be done. He raised his hands. Light gathered between his palms, bright and warm. The salamander crystal floated into the air above Jake and Lyranthi, spinning slowly. By the power of the crystal and the will of the Empire, I declare this bond complete. Let none divide what has been joined. Let none question what has been proven. From this day forward, you are one. The crystal flared with brilliant light. Jake felt something click into place deep inside him. A connection he had not known was missing. He looked at Lyranthi and saw his own wonder reflected in her golden eyes. The crowd erupted in cheers. Music swelled. Flowers rained down from somewhere above. Lyranthi pulled Jake into an embrace with all 4 of her arms. He was lifted off his feet slightly, but he did not mind. We actually did it, he said into her shoulder. We did. What happens now? Now. Lyranthi pulled back and smiled at him. Now we figure out the rest together. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Crown, looking out at the stars. A lot had changed since the bonding ceremony. He had become a celebrity, his face known across the galaxy as the human who had won a princess's heart. Reporters still followed him everywhere. Politicians still tried to use him for their own purposes. It was exhausting, but it was also wonderful. He had started a new project, working with Valorian and human engineers to improve communication systems between their peoples. The work was challenging and meaningful. He was making a difference. More importantly, he was happy. Footsteps approached behind him. He did not need to turn around to know who it was. Lyranthi came to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing against his. She was wearing casual clothes for once, a simple dress that would have shocked the nobles who were used to seeing her in ceremonial gowns. Megan called, she said. She wanted me to tell you that you still owe her money from a bet you made in engineering school. Jake laughed. I do not owe her anything. She cheated. She said you would say that, because it is true. Lyranthi smiled and leaned against him. 3 of her arms wrapped around him comfortably while the 4th rested at her side. What are you thinking about? She asked. Everything, Jake said. How strange life is. How I went to fix an air conditioner and ended up becoming space royalty. How the scariest moment of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me. Do you have any regrets? Jake considered the question seriously. He thought about his old life on the horizon's edge, his quiet existence, his normal routine. It seemed like a lifetime ago. "No," he said finally. "Not one." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars turn slowly beyond the window. Somewhere in the palace, Emperor Velsora sat alone in his private chambers. A small smile played on his lips as he watched his daughter and her bondmate through a distant monitor. He had known the crystal would choose Jake. He had been watching humanity for years, studying their rise from a primitive species to spacefaring explorers in just a few generations. He had seen something in them that others had missed. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest or the most advanced. But they had something that most species had lost somewhere along the way. Heart, pure, stubborn, irrational heart. The willingness to love even when love was not logical. The determination to fight even when fighting was hopeless. The courage to be vulnerable in a universe that punished weakness. It was exactly what the Valorian Empire needed. And it was exactly what his daughter needed. The Emperor turned off the monitor and leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, the stars stretched endlessly into the void. Somewhere out there, other empires were watching. They had seen a human engineer complete trials that had defeated Valorian warriors. They had seen him win the heart of a princess through nothing but kindness and determination. They were starting to wonder what else humanity might be capable of. The Emperor smiled. "Let them wonder," he said to himself. "Let them all wonder." And far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet called Earth, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of the stars. They did not know that one of their own had become a legend. They did not know that the universe was watching them with new eyes. But they would learn. The story of Jake Turner and Princess Laurenthe was just the beginning. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger world, and nothing would ever be the same again. The end. The trial of mind took place in a chamber deep beneath the Valorian capital. Jake stood before an ancient puzzle that had confused the greatest thinkers of the Empire for over 800 years. It was a sphere made of countless interlocking pieces, each one carved with symbols that seemed to shift when he looked directly at them. The sphere floated in the center of the room, slowly rotating, waiting to be solved. "Many have tried," the trial master said. He was an old Valorian with tired eyes. "All have failed. You have until sunset." Jake nodded and approached the sphere. Laurenthe stood in the observation area above the chamber. She had been watching Jake train for the past month. She had taught him Valorian history, customs, and language. She had explained the trials in detail. And throughout it all, she had waited for him to give up. He never did. Every morning, he woke before dawn to study. Every night, he stayed up late practicing. He asked questions constantly, even the ones that made him look foolish. He wrote notes on everything, filling book after book with his messy human handwriting. It was annoying. It was also, she had to admit, impressive. Now she watched as he circled the sphere, studying it from every angle. His face had that expression she had come to recognize over the past weeks. It was the look he got when he was thinking hard about something, when his mind was working through a problem. Hours passed. Jake tried different approaches. He touched the pieces, moved them, tried to find patterns. Nothing worked. The sphere remained unsolved. The sun began to set. The trial master stepped forward to call an end to the trial. And then Jake started humming. Laurenthe leaned forward. What was he doing? Jake was humming a tune, something simple and rhythmic. As he hummed, his fingers moved over the sphere in a new way. He was not trying to solve it like a puzzle anymore. He was playing it like an instrument. The pieces began to shift. The trial master froze mid-step, his eyes wide. "The symbols," Jake said, his voice filled with wonder. "They are not words. They are notes. This whole thing is a song." His fingers danced across the sphere, pressing pieces in a sequence that matched the rhythm of his humming. The sphere began to glow. The pieces moved faster, clicking into place one after another dot with a final turn. The sphere opened like a flower, the chamber filled with light and music. Ancient Valorian harmonies echoed off the walls, sounds that had not been heard in 8 centuries. The trial master fell to his knees. In the observation area, Laurenthe gripped the railing so hard her knuckles turned pale. Jake stood in the center of the light, grinning like a child who had just discovered something wonderful. "It is a lullaby," he said. "Someone made this puzzle for their child." The answer was always kindness, not cleverness. He had passed the trial of mind. The second trial came 2 weeks later. The burning waste stretched endlessly in every direction. The ground was cracked and dry. The air shimmered with heat. Nothing lived here. Nothing could live here. Jake was dropped at the edge of the wasteland with nothing but the clothes on his back and a small knife. He had to survive for 1 full day and night cycle. 32 hours in conditions that would kill most beings within 6. Laurenthe watched through surveillance drones as he began to walk. The first few hours were the hardest. The heat was crushing. Jake's skin turned red and then started to blister. He found a small outcropping of rock and used it for shade, pressing himself into the shadow like his life depended on it, because it did. Night came, and the temperature dropped so fast that ice formed on the rocks. Jake built a small shelter from loose stones, packing them together to trap his body heat. He did not sleep. Every time he started to drift off, he forced himself awake. Morning came, and the heat returned. Jake was weak now. He had not eaten or drunk anything. His lips were cracked. His movements were slow and clumsy, but he kept going. Laurenthe found herself unable to look away from the screens. She watched as Jake stumbled and fell. She watched as he got back up. She watched as he fell again, and again, and again. Each time he got back up. Why does he not stop? Admiral HFY asked. He stood beside her, watching with a frown on his face. He is clearly dying. Any sensible being would accept defeat. Humans do not accept defeat, Laurenthe said softly. She was not sure when she had learned this, but she knew it was true. With 4 hours left, Jake collapsed and did not get up. Laurenthe's heart stopped. She leaned toward the screen, searching for any sign of movement. Then she saw his hand twitch. His fingers dug into the sand. With agonizing slowness, Jake pulled himself forward. He could not walk anymore, so he crawled. Inch by inch, he dragged his broken body toward the finish line. He crossed it with 7 minutes to spare. Medical teams rushed to help him. Laurenthe was already running toward the transport ship before she realized what she was doing. She reached Jake just as they were loading him onto a stretcher. He looked terrible. His skin was burned. His lips were bleeding. His eyes were barely open. But when he saw her, he smiled. "Told you," he whispered. "Humans do not quit." Something cracked inside Laurenthe's chest. Something she had built up over years of royal training and emotional control. She felt tears forming in her eyes, which was impossible. Valorian princesses did not cry. "You foolish, stubborn creature," she said. Her voice was shaking. "You almost died." "But I did not," Jake replied. "That is what matters." She stood there as they carried him away. Admiral HFY appeared at her side. "He was lucky," the admiral said. "Nothing more. The trial of heart will break him. You will see." Laurenthe did not answer. She was still staring at the spot where Jake had been lying. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she found herself hoping he would succeed. The third trial was scheduled for the following month. Jake needed time to recover from the burning wastes. He spent 2 weeks in a healing chamber, floating in blue liquid that repaired his damaged body. Laurenthe visited him every day. At first, she told herself it was duty. She was his guide, after all. It would look strange if she did not check on his progress. But as the days passed, she stopped pretending. She liked talking to him. He was funny in a way that Valorian nobles were not. He made jokes about serious things and treated small things with exaggerated importance. He listened when she spoke and asked questions that showed he actually cared about the answers. He told her about Earth, about blue skies and green, trees and oceans that stretched beyond sight, about his childhood dreams of reaching the stars, about the friends he had left behind and the life he had given up. She found herself telling him things too, about the pressure of being a princess, about the suitors she had rejected because they only wanted her title, about her fear that she would never find someone who saw her as anything more than a prize to be won. "The crystal saw you differently," Jake said one day. "That is why it chose you." "What do you mean?" "You are not just a princess to the crystal. You are Lyranthi, a person with hopes and fears and dreams. The crystal did not pick a match for a title. It picked a match for you." Lyranthi was quiet for a long moment. "And what did it see in you?" she asked finally. Jake smiled. "I have no idea. But I'm starting to think maybe it knew something I did not." Their eyes met through the glass of the healing chamber. Neither of them looked away. The trial of heart was coming, and both of them knew that everything was about to change. The sacred chamber of memories was the most private place in the Valorian Empire. It sat at the heart of the imperial palace, accessible only through a single door that had not been opened in decades. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to absorb light. In the center of the room floated the memory sphere, a ball of swirling silver mist that was older than the empire itself. Every seat in the viewing gallery was filled. Nobles, politicians, military leaders, and common citizens had gathered to witness the trial of heart. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. This was where the human would finally fail. Or so most of them believed. Jake stood at the entrance to the chamber. He was dressed in simple white clothes, the traditional garment for those undertaking this trial. His hands were steady, but Lyranthi could see the tension in his shoulders. She had explained the trial to him many times. The memory sphere would reach into his mind and pull out everything. Every memory, every fear, every secret he had ever kept. It would display them for all to see. There would be nowhere to hide. Many Valorian nobles had failed this trial, not because they lacked courage, but because they could not bear to have their true selves exposed. The shame had broken them. "You do not have to do this," Lyranthi said quietly. They stood together at the entrance, away from the crowd. "If you walk away now, no one will think less of you." Jake looked at her. His eyes were calm. "Would you think less of me?" Lyranthi hesitated. A month ago, she would have said yes without thinking. Now she was not so sure. "I would understand," she said instead. Jake nodded slowly. "I have spent my whole life being nobody special. Average grades, average job, average everything. People looked right through me most of the time. And that was fine. I did not need to be special. But this," he gestured at the chamber, "this is my chance to show who I really am. Not just to them, to myself." He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm against her blue skin. "I am not afraid," he said. "I have nothing to hide." He turned and walked into the chamber. The doors closed behind him. The memory sphere began to glow. Images appeared in the air above the chamber, projected so that everyone could see. The story of Jake Turner began to unfold. They saw his childhood. A small house on a quiet street. Parents who worked long hours, but always made time for dinner together. A boy who took apart his toys to see how they worked, then carefully put them back together again. They saw his teenage years. Awkward and uncertain, but kind. Helping a younger student who was being bullied, even though he was scared. Staying up late to tutor classmates who were struggling. crying alone in his room when his grandmother died, then going to school the next day with a smile because he did not want anyone to worry about him. They saw his failures. Tests he did not pass. Jobs he did not get. Relationships that ended badly. They saw him sitting alone on his 25th birthday because all his friends were too busy. They saw him wondering if he would ever amount to anything. The Valorian nobles watched in silence. They had expected to see darkness, scandal, secrets worth mocking. Instead, they saw something else entirely. They saw a man who was genuinely, deeply good. The images continued. Jake joining the horizon's edge as an engineer. Working double shifts without complaint. Sharing his food with a colleague who had forgotten to pack lunch. Standing up to a senior officer who was mistreating a junior crew member, even though it meant getting written up. They saw his hopes. Dreams of exploration and discovery. A desire to see the stars that had burned inside him since childhood. The belief, quiet but unshakable, that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be found. And then they saw his thoughts about Lyranthi. The chamber fell completely silent. The images showed Jake watching Lyranthi during their training sessions. Not with desire or ambition, but with something softer. Admiration for her strength. Sympathy for her loneliness. The slow realization that beneath the ice, there was a woman who had never been allowed to be anything other than perfect. They saw him thinking about how beautiful her laugh was the one time he had made her smile. They saw him worrying about whether she was happy. They saw him hoping, quietly and without expectation, that maybe he could be someone she trusted. Lyranthi sat frozen in her seat. Her heart was pounding so hard, she could hear it in her ears. The memory sphere began to dim. The trial was almost over. Jake had survived, and then everything went wrong. The doors to the chamber burst open. Admiral Kethfer strode in, followed by a group of armed soldiers. His face was twisted with anger. "This farce ends now," he declared. "The human has bewitched the crystal somehow. This trial is invalid." "Uncle, you cannot." Lyranthi started to rise from her seat. "I am protecting this empire," Kethfer snapped. "Guards, seize the human." The soldiers rushed toward Jake. He did not run. He did not beg. He simply raised his hands and prepared to fight. He was no match for Valorian warriors. They were stronger, faster, and trained for combat. But Jake did not stop. Every time they knocked him down, he got back up. Every time they hit him, he struck back. Blood ran down his face. His arm bent at an angle that made Lyranthi feel sick. But still he fought, refusing to surrender, refusing to give in. "Why will you not stay down?" One of the soldiers shouted in frustration. Jake spat blood onto the floor and grinned. "Because I am human, and this is what we do." He swung at the soldier with his good arm. The blow connected. The soldier stumbled back in surprise. That was when Lyranthi moved. She had never moved so fast in her life. One moment she was in the viewing gallery. The next, she was standing between Jake and the remaining soldiers, all four of her arms raised in a defensive stance. "Enough," she said. Her voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Anyone who touches him again will answer to me." Kethfer stared at her. "Niece, you cannot be serious." "He is just a human. He is my bondmate," Lyranthi said. The words came out before she could stop them. Before she could even think about what they meant. The crystal chose him. I choose him. And I will fight anyone who tries to take him from me. The chamber was completely silent. Jake looked up at her from where he knelt on the floor. His face was a mess of blood and bruises. But his eyes were shining. "You called me your bondmate," he said. "I did. You said you choose me. I did. Does this mean I passed the trial?" Lyranthi looked down at him. This stubborn, ridiculous, brave human who had somehow turned her entire world upside down. She felt tears forming in her eyes again, and this time she did not try to stop them. "Yes," she said. "You passed." Emperor Velsora rose from his throne. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Admiral Kethfer, you are under arrest for treason. Guards, take him away." The admiral's face went pale. "Your Majesty, I was only trying to protect. You were trying to deny the will of the crystal and harm the chosen bondmate of my daughter. That is treason. Take him." The soldiers who had attacked Jake now turned on their commander. Kethfer was led away in chains, still shouting protests that no one listened to. Jake tried to stand and nearly fell. Larenthi caught him with two of her arms, holding him gently against her side. "Easy," she said. "You are injured." "I have had worse," Jake said. Then he paused. "Actually, no. This is definitely the worst. But I am still standing. You are barely standing. That still counts." Larenthi laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and warm, and it filled the chamber with a sound that many of the nobles had never heard before. The princess was laughing. The princess was crying. The princess was holding a battered human in her arms, like he was the most precious thing in the universe. And somehow, impossibly, it all felt right.